Howdy folks, CalebDMTG here. Throne of Eldraine is officially spoilered. We got all the cards, and I am excited to talk to you about Adventure. Now, before we get too deep into the video, I do want to mention this is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, the company that makes the old Magic the Gathering. And oh man, it just makes me giddy. It makes me giddy because I'm branded, right? Like I've got CalebDMTG as my name, right? It's on my Twitch, it's on my Twitter. They've got me. They know they got me, and they're still sending me love. They're still shipping me some support because they think it's the right thing to do. I don't.
You love me. You really love me.
I'm not questioning it. It's awesome. It's great. Thank you, Wizards. Let's get into the spoilers. Now, for people who haven't seen one of my overviews before, I tend to rate cards into 4 different categories. Filler is generally comprised of cards that you're fine playing one of in a deck, but you don't want to get drawn into that color necessarily during the drafting portion. You're not drafting these cards super early. They might even show up like very, very late, and they're just like rounding out your curve, adding a couple of weaker tricks because you're lacking removal, that sort of thing. A 2-drop you play because you need a 2-drop, for example. We don't spend a lot of time on filler. It's just a category for evaluation purposes. Now, quality filler is stuff you can draft very early on with the idea that it might shape your draft in a beneficial way or that it's simply a powerful tool, right? Like quality removal, quality card draw, quality threats. All of those cards are very much worth picking very early on and then like trying to shape you into that color so you can like, play your best cards, right? Limited bombs are pack one, pick one material. And I lump build-arounds in this category as well, even though those cards tend to be less powerful individually because if you do get the correct deck for them, they pop off in a very bomby way, and they don't quite fit into the other categories. Finally, the last category is constructed-minded cards. These are cards that can be great in limited, but are going to have a larger impact on constructed formats. Usually these cards are rare or mythic, and they're still great in limited, but they just won't be open enough to spend a lot of time discussing in that context, and cards that are designed as hosers for older formats can also fit into this category. Either Sworn Canonist, for example, is a card that didn't do anything in Standard, sees a ton of play in older formats, not the best limited card. You get where I'm going with this. Now, in case you hadn't guessed by now from the title and me mentioning Adventure, we're going to be talking about the Adventure mechanic in this video. Adventure is a mechanic. It's kind of a new format for split cards, where the main card is a creature. If you play the creature, you got the creature. That's there. That's your card. If you play the other half, generally an instant or sorcery, it exiles. And then you can play the creature half from exile later on. It just like marches back on into the battlefield. Now, that's flavor. That's what I call flavor. See, it goes on a little adventure, and then when it comes back later, it's flavor! Anyway, Adventure, naturally, because it's 2 cards, and if you play it in the right order, you get 2 cards value out of it. And I think a lot of the Adventure cards are costed to see play in Constructed. Possibly some older formats, but definitely Standard. A lot of these cards are going to see a lot of play in Standard. So let's get through the fillers so we can get to the juicy juice as quickly as possible. 1, Lonesome Unicorn. This card, I really like the flavor, love it a lot. Reminds me of the movie The Last Unicorn, quite a bit. You have like anyway, I won't go into that too much. This card I think is just filler. You technically get 2 cards out of it. You have the 3-mana 2/2 and then the 5-mana 3/3, and you play them on curve and whatnot. And 5 mana for 5 power and 5 toughness is not bad. But I wouldn't be stuffing a deck full of these, right? Like 3 mana for a 2/2 on turn 3 is like not an amazing rate. 5 mana for a 3/3 on turn 5 is not an amazing rate. You are paying 8 mana overall, so it's okay. It's okay. Not an embarrassing card to play. Not looking to play a lot of them. Rosethorn Acolyte is mostly a 3 casting cost mana dork, useful for splashing, also good with the Adamant mechanic, which cares about the color of mana that you use to play a spell. We'll get more into Adamant later this week. Right now, I'm saying this card is filler just because 3 mana dork is pretty average. Garenbrig Carver and Garenbrig Squire are not embarrassing cards to play by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not looking to stuff my deck with them either. Flaccid Intruder, I get the flavor of the card, but the two halves don't have much synergy, and I'm guessing that it plays more like a split card than most of the adventure cards. A lot of the adventure cards, it's very smooth, right? You play the adventure. A lot of times it's cheaper than the creatures. You play the adventure first, then you play the creature. You're gonna be getting your value most of the time. So unless you've got an adventure mechanic, I don't see picking this card super highly. But maybe I'm misevaluating it. Yeah, 1/2 bodies just don't tend to be that great in limited, which is why I'm valuing this maybe a little bit lower than I should be. Rimrock Knight seems like a good example of filler. Reaper of Night is powerful, super slow. Queen of Ice, it's fine. Fairy Godmother, Shepherding the Flock is good versus pacifism effects or for saving a creature, but it's ultimately narrow, and 2 mana 3/1s are very fillery. So you should play it if you need a 2-drop. You can play it as like a weird little trick to save your creature in combat or something. I don't know. Maybe there's some synergies with comes into play abilities. Anyway, Silverflame Squire, our last one here. This adventure is pretty good. And if the value body was a bit heftier, I think this would be an excellent card. As is, I think you play it if your deck could use a weaker 2-drop or a weaker trick, and then just be happy that you get the other card some of the time, right? So you need a 2-drop, and you play it as a 2-drop. And then if you draw it later, you get a trick out of it. It's like fine, right? It's okay. Second up, quality filler. Ooh. Getting the little tasty nibbles here. Falmore Knight. I love a cheap little Death Toucher or 2 to trade up against giant green dorks. Over the years, as Magic has evolved, I've enjoyed 1 mana 1/1 Death Touches more and more. Now this is that card plus value. So it trades off early in the early game, so you don't get run over if you're playing against a very aggressive deck. In the late game, it trades up versus crawworms and stuff, like just giant green creatures. And now we can draw a card as well. Heck yes. I'll be drafting a lot of this card. Curious Pair, 2 mana for a 1/3 is playable in some limited formats, so it doesn't take much value for these stats to start looking attractive. If you do not have food payoffs in your deck, and we'll be talking about food a little bit more later, but suffice to say, it's like a secondary resource in this format. It's a lot like clues or energy. It's actually closer to energy, I think, than clues were, but we'll be talking about that in a video later this week. Anyway, if you have payoffs for food, this card seems pretty good. Seems pretty strong. You might want multiples. If you do not have payoffs for food, it's a little fillery. You're only going to play it if you need a 2-drop. Ardenvale Tactician, 3 mana for a 2/3 flyer is already some solid stats. You add a bit of tempo value, which you can use offensively or defensively, tapping things down. And yeah, tasty bit of gravy indeed. Tasty. Twinvale Treefolk is 2 reasonable limited cards mashed together. So I think either of these cards is perfectly fine, and then it's pretty powerful in combination, right? Pump a creature, play a creature. Wandermare, which is not an exciting pack 1 pick 1, but a 3 mana 3/3 is a solid body already. So I think it's pretty quality. You don't need to trigger it too often before it becomes a really good rate, right? You trigger it twice, and now you've got a 5/5, just bigger than most creatures. Merfolk Secret Keeper is a card that's going to be fillery in a lot of decks, and it obviously needs the right deck, but this card at common and a couple of the other commons in the set make me think that there's going to be a pretty reasonable limited mill deck. So now here we are. Category 3, limited bombs and build-arounds. Order of Midnight, Gravedigger with flying. It doesn't block very well, but you can also curve out, play a 2 mana 2x flyer. That's great. It's a great limited card. Heck yes. Pack 1 pick 1 easily. Mysterious Pathlighter, 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer is already pretty good, and adventure creatures are pretty good. Not quite bomb level, but it seems great. It seems like a great little build around. You can draft it early. Just take cards that go well with it. Yeah, you do know. You don't need me. Why are you watching this video? Okay, well, you don't know that much. Come on, let's rate it. Let's not get too hasty here. All right, Animating Fairy is a card that is pretty hard to evaluate, but there is food in this format. Food takes the place of a token in play that's that you can sacrifice for 2 mana to gain 3 life, right? And so it's like a clue that sits there, a little clue token, a little artifact. And so because that's a mechanic in this format, because we have various creatures spitting out artifacts, it makes me think that 3 mana to turn an artifact into a 4/4 is pretty great. I think you might be able to just do that on turn 3 consistently. which makes me evaluate this card a bit higher. Now, if it's harder to do that, if it's harder to have food by turn 3 than I'm thinking, then maybe this card's a little bit worse. But right now, it seems very good to me. Especially in blue, which you just don't have that many like efficient, fatty creatures. Worst case scenario, you have a 2/2 flyer, so chucks. Dang, good card. It's possible that this card's only quality filler, but I think it's a little balmy if you can have a 4/4 on turn 3 consistently. Edgewall Innkeeper. Good example of a card in this category. Lovestruck Beast seems like a good limited bomb. It's close to a constructed role player, but being reliant on 1/1s means that the card is actually weak to soft removal. Like a Disfigure or a Shock or something. Now you can't attack with your 5/5, and you're just sitting there, and you control players laughing at you, and you're like, I just wanted to play F&M, what are you doing? I just want to attack. And then you can't go to that store anymore. Nah, I didn't. This is getting a little too personal. Anyway, so Lovestruck Beast, fun card, certainly a sweet card. Probably not quite good enough. It's got a very real downside, right? A very real downside. Love the card. There's probably going to be better beaters that you want to be attacking with. Oakhane Ranger is a little clunky for constructed, but a nice pair of synergistic cards for limited. The tap ability is overall worse than a static lore artifact, but it could be interesting with vigilance or untapped triggers. I'll probably take this card pretty highly, but we'll see. I might be overvaluating it. Lucky Clover. As a general rule, I am fairly skeptical of cards that do not impact the board at all, but this one doesn't take much to start producing value. So the first time you play an adventure, you're copying that adventure and basically getting your card back. And the second time you play an adventure, all of a sudden you've got value, right? It's kind of like it's a little bit better than having drawn 2 cards because you've also gotten to play those 2 cards, right? The cards have been copied; they're on the stack. You haven't had to pay extra mana for them, so it doesn't seem that hard for this card to be nuts. I think if you have like 5 adventures in a deck, it's going to be excellent. Obviously, it does depend on what adventure spells you're copying. Top-end adventure cards like Flaxen Intruder get much better with this card in your deck. Oh my god. 6 2/2s instead of 3? Get out of here. Here we are, category number 4, constructed cards. Alright. So these cards are good in limited too, right? A lot of them are just fine in limited, but I think they're more interesting in a constructed context. First up, Merchant of the Veil. While not a replacement for Faithless Looting, Insolent Neonate has seen play before, and this card is as good or better in non-Vengevine decks, right? So Neonate in a Vengevine deck is pretty important because it's a creature to trigger Vengevine at the same time that it's binning Vengevine. This card, when you're playing the adventure half, it's not a creature to trigger Vengevine, but in decks that don't care about that, like say Goryo's Vengeance or Dredge, I mean, you don't care about that, right? And it's just another Neonate. Possibly better, because then you can play the creature half later. Embereth Shieldbreaker doesn't hit Chalice of the Void, and thus it's probably not going to see play in older formats, but value is still value, and Shieldbreaker is still a fine sideboard card if artifacts show up in Standard, and also note that cubes everywhere get an upgrade to Manic Vandal. Not too shabby. Bone Crusher Giant. This card is strong. I mean, real strong. I'm going to say, like, 3 mana for a 4/3 that domed you when you had to target it would already be pretty solid, and there's just like a burn spell tacked on that you can play on curve. So, like, 2 mana, shock something, turn 3, 4/3. Yeah. How many other spells do you need in your hand to keep a hand that has Bone Crusher Giant? Not very many, right? Like, you could keep, like, I feel like you can keep double Bone Crusher Giant 5 lands in a aggro red deck, and that's like totally reasonable. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm off base, but it seems real strong. You got a burn spell that stops life gain while curving into a giant body. And then I think Magma Jet would be good enough for Standard. And drawing a 4/3 body that costs 3 mana seems way better than a Scry 2 to me. So card's great, right? I don't know, it seems great. Smitten Swordmaster. While a solid limited card, 2 mana, 2/1 lifelink, sure, makes the cut a lot of the time. So while it's solid and limited, I think it gets even better in constructed, where you can build around it, where you can stuff your deck full of knights, where you can always have this critical mass of knights. The adventure part of this card reminds me of Goblin War Strike, but with a body attached. So it should be good. Might see some play. Play. Murderous Rider. This is one of the cards I'm most excited about in the set. Value on a removal spell. Yes, please. So it's a standard all-star, and it's probably going to be good enough for Modern too. I mean, 3 mana for removal spells a lot in Modern, so it's not going to like be a 4 of in a lot of decks or anything like that. But don't be surprised if you see this showing up as a 1 or 2 of in various like Grixis Control Brews, that sort of thing. It should be really good in those decks. A 2/3 lifelinking body is exactly the thing that makes me less worried about paying a few life on the front end. It's good value. It's a good card. Giant Killer is a situational removal that you can play as a body when the removal half is dead. Not bad. Great in White Weenie. Probably a 4 of in White Weenie. 3/4 of. I don't know. And it could easily show up as a 1 of in slower decks that value the 1/2 body less. So just like having a situational removal that, oh, it turns out you're playing against a control deck. All right, I guess I'll just play it as a 1/2 thing to attack your Teferi or something. You know, it's fine. Realm-Cloaked Giant is limited. Boom! And almost certainly good enough for Constructed. I can't wait to cast this card. Brazen Borrower. Oh, wow. Did Twitter ever have a lot to say about this one? Some people look at it and see a Vendilion click, and other people see a Rishadan Airship with extra steps. Personally, I think that both the creature and the adventure being instant speed makes the card quite good. Like, you can 5 mana both halves of this on your opponent's end of turn, and like bounce whatever they did for the turn, and have a 3/1 to attack them and start applying pressure. I'm excited to cast this card a lot in Standard, especially in the blue-green flash deck, and it makes me wonder if it'll even see older format play. So it's probably not good enough for Legacy, where 3 mana for a 3/1 can also have like protection from your opponent. But for the first time in a while, I've thought, I wonder if this makes Modern Fairies interesting. They seem the set of abilities seem good in Modern Fairies, right? Bounce of cards, you can counter it with Spell Stutter Sprite, and that sort of deal. 3/1 body, well, seems good. Alright, Hypnotic Sprite is not the sort of card that fits into a lot of decks, but I've played enough Tempo-y mono blue aggro decks in Standard that would have loved this card to not discredit it. I look forward to seeing if it finds a home. Probably not a first pick in Limited, but Flying's a good ability, so it's decent there too. It'll be interesting to see if like Devotion ends up coming back in the future sets, because if it does, this card's gonna see some play. I'm calling it early. Beanstalk Giant. Is it just me, or is this card kind of great? I feel like I'm the only one who saw this card and was like, But we haven't had a 2 mana rampant growth in Standard for a while. And we're like kind of getting used to just like having 3 mana acceleration in the format, like that just being the standard. And for a 3 mana rampant growth, the card's kind of good. Eventually, you just get to have some 7 mana giant creature, right? And later in the game, solid bit of value. Sometimes ramp decks flood, and having anything, any actual card at all, anything to do at all with your mana when you're flooding is strong. And this card seems pretty good when you're flooding. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you have. So, yeah, no, I think it's good. And finally, we get to the last adventure card that I haven't mentioned yet, Fae of Wishes. Mastermind's acquisition already saw a ton of play in both Standard and Best of 1 Standard, and this is an easier cast version that also comes down as a 1/4 blocker for 2 mana. And if you play it as a blocker early, if you have to run it out early against an aggro deck, later you can rebuy it by discarding some dead cards or extra lands or what have you, and then play it and get some giant finisher to kill your opponent. This card is awesome. It seems really good, right? It seems really good. It makes me wonder if I'm missing something. I'm just like, okay, well, Mastermind's acquisition saw a lot of play in like a certain style of control deck, and here you just have a much better version of that. So yay, awesome. Those decks really missed like just having something to do on turn 2 as well on this card. It's just fine, right? 2 mana for a 1/4 flyer? Heck yeah. Probably not quite good enough for like Modern and Legacy, but should see a lot of play in Standard, I think. I would think. I would be remiss if I left you folks without a deck list. And this is my first brew of the format. We got some Golos ramp field action going on, right? When I'm thinking of the adventure mechanic, this is the deck that I thought of that could abuse the most cards, right? We've got the 3 mana rampant growth in Beanstalk Giant. We have the sweeper in Realm-Cloaked Giant that can also come back as a 7/7. And both of these cards seem like pretty good hits for Golos, right? Like you're activating Golos and you're just like, oh, play some 7/7s, why not? Sure, why not? Value 7/7s all over the place. Now, the weakness of those cards is that if you're playing a field mirror, a random 7/7 just isn't going to matter, right? Like, both players have just like a pile of 2/2s, so who cares? Like, you've got a 7/7 off your Golos. It's not going to do anything. Nobody cares. The only cards there that matter are field. So another card here that's probably a little too cute is End-Raze Forerunners. Give the Giants Trample. Give your random 2/2s Trample. +2/+2. Might be good enough. Might be powerful enough. It's certainly sweet. It's certainly sweet. A lot of this deck, the ideas behind it are inspired by work from my Tempo Storm teammate and Golos Master Extraordinaire, Ollie Eldrazi. You can find him at twitch.tv/Ollie Eldrazi, ALIELDRAZI. Anyway, you got Beanstalk Giant replacing Elvish Rejuvenator and Realm-Cloaked Giant replacing Random Sweeper. Yeah. Alright, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed this stream. What? Or not stream. I'm so used to streaming. I need to do more YouTube stuff. Hope you enjoyed this video. My plan before pre-release, I want to have a few more videos released. One on food, one on the food mechanic, one on adamant and how it should impact the construction of your limited decks. A fourth VOD that's going to be longer that goes over the remaining cards. And I don't know if I'm going to do a fifth VOD talking about the impacts on Modern or just like wrap that into the fourth VOD. It should be a monster. I've got most of it mapped out. It should be a good time. Catch y'all later. CalebD out! CalebD out!